Hi there. My name's Andrew. I'm a general partner at Makers Fund, a global gaming dedicated venture fund. We invest in Series A and seed gaming companies around the world in content, consumer platforms, and technology. Before joining Makers, I was at McKinsey, associate partner there, working with many of our largest gaming publishers and developers in the world. And I'm very pleased to be here today. Thank you for joining to speak with three distinguished Web3 gaming CEOs and founders. And I think it's a unique opportunity to speak with them, each taking a very distinct approach and at a different stage of development in terms of their games and companies. And so I'd like to start out today by having each of them introducing themselves and their company, where they're at today, and their vision for the future. So maybe we'll start with Saro and work our way across.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarojini McKenna. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Dacoco. We have produced the game Alien Worlds, which is a decentralized metaverse where you use NFTs, utility NFTs, to play the game, mine the fungible token, which you can then use to stake on one of our 6 competitive Planet DAOs. So DAOs are in-game components that allow people as teams to compete with each other. We're the largest blockchain game by users. We started life building DAO technology and then put that inside of a game, and really honored to be here today with some really great Web3 gaming founders.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Trailblazer Games. We develop Web3 gaming. We have a vision of a universe with shared assets. And my background, I've been in gaming for over 15 years. I'm an entrepreneur. My previous company, which was a gaming analytics company called Omniata, got acquired by King, and that started in 2017. I've been at EA. I've been at Microsoft. And I just love what we're seeing today in gaming, finally evolving to that next stage, something we've been waiting perhaps since the evolution of free-to-play. We think that this is going to be even bigger. So really honored to be here on stage with such a fantastic company. Thank you for having us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jeremy Horn. I've also been in gaming for a bit. It's been 13 years. I was an early participant in the free-to-play revolution and worked at companies like Ubisoft and Gameloft, Tinyco, and Jam City. And about a year ago, I co-founded a company called Xterio. We recently announced a $40 million raise, and we are developing a platform, a GameFi as a service toolkit, and we're publishing Web3 games. We're very, new and nascent. We haven't announced our games yet, but we will very soon. So really humbled to be here with such great participants.
So as gaming investors, whether it's Web3 or traditional games, we are looking for those companies that are willing to push innovation in terms of game design and willing to make changes, either improving or expanding on traditional genres. And I wonder, Jeremy, in the seat of the publisher, where you see opportunities for innovation on game design and shifting genres.
Yeah, it's a great question. Design in general is iterative, right? It is very, very challenging to create something that is absolutely unseen, and I'm sure we are going to see more and more of those experiences on Web3. But as of today, most of those experiences are somewhat derivative of existing mechanics, and that's where we're going to see most of the catalyst of growth. It's proven mechanics that can attract gamers and really focus on fun. Where I'm more interested is really on how those mechanics are going to change through digital ownership, right? The stakes are so different when you have an emotional connection, but also a financial connection to an asset. And when you think about worlds where you're able to own part of a base, an army's characters, you're going to really engage at a deeper level with the community, with the developer, with the ecosystem. And that's where we're going to see most of the changes. It's really on the user behavior rather than, I think, on the core mechanics. But really excited to see where the space goes and hopefully be surprised by mechanics that I could not even imagine. And we've seen that in free-to-play. Most of the successful games are derivative. But then we saw Pokemon Go. We saw games that really you had never seen before in terms of technology application.
Like an aspect of game design that gets me excited and something we debate a lot internally is the role of on-chain games in pushing game design forward. I think there are some real opportunities if you can imagine all of the data within a game, every user action being codified on-chain, but also real costs in terms of delivering that today. And Saro, I know that you with Alien Worlds have been pushing that forward and testing some new things, and I wonder, one, how you think about the costs and benefits of on-chain, and two, what kind of emergent behavior you're seeing from your users.
Oh, yeah. So our construction is almost entirely on-chain. So our actual game logic is running on a public permissionless blockchain. So that means that when you play the game, when you do a game action, you could then go onto a block explorer and see that, whether it was staking or voting or a mine action or whatever. So that's fairly unusual for the large blockchain games. Many of them have had to locate much of their actual game logic off-chain, and it's their assets or certain transactions that they sort of push to the chain. But in our case, we have most of the logic actually running on a public blockchain. So the pro of that, and the reason why we did it, is that you are creating an open architecture that other people can build into, right? So when we then build APIs, that means that other developers can then create components, games, other things on top of that. And even, in fact, we don't have to build the APIs. Other people can build those too because the actions are running on-chain. The other kind of good, the benefit of it is that it's independently verifiable, right? So there are data aggregators, and anybody could validate the number of transactions and so on that are being generated from the game. And it also means that our community can see that. And the more sort of technically able teams within our community are able to make use of that data. So for example, there's a company that offers services to the Alien Worlds metaverse. They offer NFT creation services, drop services, and other promotional campaigns. And they can do that because they can read all of the on-chain behavioral patterns of users and the DAOs. And so they can kind of target goods and services in that way. So we don't have to do any of that, which is great, right? Because we're busy doing other things. And when you're in this market, it's really helpful if you've got your whole community building with you as opposed to just trying to do it all on your own, right? So that's what's good about a very on-chain construction. What's obviously less good is that, firstly, many chains can't support that, in terms of gas fees or even just the sophistication of the smart contract languages that are, running on them. And it's heavy on the chain. There's a big transactional load. It's can be more costly depending on what the construction is. So I don't know that necessarily we will always be building out future features in quite that purist way, I guess you could say. But we do come from a sort of blockchain background, and we wanted to really build a transparent, open architecture, and it's had benefits for sure.
And one thing we've thought about in terms of that open architecture is the risk and reward of people building on top of it, or even forking your game or taking the data and tech elsewhere. Is that a risk that you're concerned about, or a benefit?
I mean, I actually see that as a benefit. But this is getting to the heart of where value is really generated in Web3 projects versus Web2 projects.
Yeah.
Like, is it because you're protecting your IP and protecting, your login and then trying to push advertising onto your users? A very Web2 kind of mindset. Or are you just trying to build something that as many people feel motivated to both use but also build alongside you? And then value happens in a lot of ways in that type of system. Transactional flows, NFT flows, for example, between counterparties within the metaverse, not necessarily involving the founding company. There can be margins extracted on those NFT transfers. You can build in margins and a revenue model. Once you have a lot of users transacting bilaterally, there are revenue models that emerge from that. But yeah, definitely as the founding company, I think you are sort of giving away some value in a sense, but you're doing that in order to create a much, much bigger and more valuable thing in general. And that's really the difference between Web 2 and Web 3 is that mindset, I think.
Right. And Alex or Jeremy, have you guys experimented with the idea of going 100% on-chain with the products you're building?
So I can tell you more about the community, or?
Well, maybe it's a good segue into the community aspect of, one, to your point of creating value by unlocking the on-chain elements to the community. And Alex, I know with Eternal Dragons, you've been really putting a lot of power and emphasis on the community. I feel like in the investor seat, we heard a lot last year about how valuable the community is. It's everything in Web3, but in 2022, it's seeming a little bit less sticky when the connectivity is tied to token prices. And so I wonder, through this bear market, what is the true value of community in the Web3 setting, and two, how do you foster it and get value of it for games?
No, absolutely. So I'll be honest, I think that our original thesis when we raised capital back in December was very product-oriented. That's the background of the founders. One of my co-founders was running Candy Crush. The other one was coming from SimCity. So it was like, we saw the quality really wasn't there. We're going to make amazing games on Web3 with on-chain components, which I think is going to expand and take it to the next level. But then we realized that we needed to build the community around that. We really didn't know much about that. So we brought someone from that was actually running community for Sorare that has more background on Web3. And then that really changed the thesis entirely. Because when we went out and announced the game, suddenly we have these tens of thousands of people in our Discord. We have people making amazing art to be part of that, such level of excitement that we realized that it was a type of relationship that you've never seen in gaming before. To meet people like in person, to get to know them better, to feel part of a shared team is something that for us was news. Honestly, coming from a data background, acquiring and growing a game was much more about spending on user acquisition and more data-driven. Now you get to meet them, in person. So it switched in a sense that for us now the community is at the center, and we have the roadmap of experiences and games around it to grow it, to make it more interesting, more fun, more engaging. And it became such that when we announced our first convention in Berlin, we only gave them like 1 week in advance notice, and more than 100 people showed up from all over Europe. Some drove like 22 hours to get there. Some even brought their families. Some slept during that night at their cars because they told me, why would I spend in a hotel if I could buy a dragon? And I was like, well, that's commitment right there. So I think that's the thesis of Web3, which there's a different social contract within investors, game developers, and players, and the broader community where they want to be part of something that's bigger than gaming. We have people that spend tens of thousands of dollars, hours in commitment that may not even play the game because they want to be part of that community, what I call community as a destination. Just the sense of belonging to it, it's on itself something very rewarding. And on top of that, you add all the entertainment that games can bring. And I think that is the evolution of gaming. That's the part that we saw that as the biggest opportunity, honestly, on Web3 is to grow beyond gaming and to bring people together with a type of relationship that's different than what we have seen on Web2 so far.
Yeah, it's something that we think about a lot, and there is both the size of the community but also the depth in terms of how engaged folks are. And for early stage, really traditional gaming or Web3 companies, having those real evangelists who are willing to drive dozens of hours or sleep in their car because they're so committed to your project, that will end up being the core of any social-driven experience, whether it's an MMO or auto battler or anything else. One thing we think about related to community is how scalable it is, though, and I think over the last couple of years I've seen folks very effectively build those evangelists and then the circle of community around it to get to 5,000, 10,000, hundreds of thousands of folks. But I think there's still a major gap from traditional gaming to Web3 of understanding how to put a couple extra zeros on those numbers to get to millions or tens of millions of users like we see in many traditional mobile games. And Jeremy, I know you're sitting in the seat building the publishing tools and the development tools to help folks go to market. And I guess I'm interested in one, where you see major gaps in traditional publishing versus Web3 today and how those can effectively be filled in a way that's, I guess, authentic to the Web3 experience.
Yeah, when you look at the space right now, the technology for developers is arguably very mature, right? There is no centralized toolkit that allows a developer to obtain data, analyze it, act upon it, or scan through wallets and how to identify the right users, or just do live operations on NFTs deployment, minting, modifications, transaction. So very, very mature space. And honestly, it's very reminiscent of the early days of free-to-play. I remember having very broken dashboards and very mature tools to use, and that's going to change. So the way we see value at Xterio for developers is how do we onboard a lot of Web 2 developers or incoming Web 3 developers by providing them a unified toolkit so that they're able to go through the entire development pipeline from inception all the way to live operations and optimization. And this is something we're spending quite a lot of time on, obviously, but I really look forward to having more developers participating in the ecosystem and giving them the tools to be successful. So really glad to be working on this problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I may add on when it comes to using data and the infrastructure needed, for growth, one of our experience being, we joke that we call it, we're building Web 5 because it's Web 2 plus Web 3, meaning that it doesn't need to be one or the other. There are really good aspects in Web 2 that are relevant for experience, like what do you use as a login, and perhaps abstracting away all the really tough parts of the user experience associated to Web 3, like creating wallets and doing transfers and so on. How about we abstract that? We focus on the opportunities that Web 3 brings to the gamers, but the technology can be abstracted away. I think that's a great aspect of to think about how Web 2 and Web 3 can together build a better product.
You hit on it when you talked about community. Marketing Web 3 is a totally different ballgame. Some channels of user acquisitions are currently closed to Web 3 games. And so how do you attract the right users? You have to reinvent the entire marketing pipeline from identifying the right users, airdropping special assets or messages into their wallet, building those Discord communities and Twitter communities. And it is actually a very, very complex matter as the noise is growing, as there's more and more competition. We're trying to help developers focus on developing great games while we really take a very strong hand into developing those communities, helping them pierce through the noise. And to be honest, a space that is becoming more and more expensive in terms of pure CPI and acquisition of consumers.
Yeah. If I may, one more comment that one experience we had was we went through hopefully the worst part of the crash in crypto, and that's when we decided to do our NFT sale. So it was like that moment. So we broke it up into 10 batches. So every week we were introducing new content. It was more like content drops. But what was crucial, the opportunities on Web3 is that we could see the behavior on the wallets of the buyers. And we would use that information for actually polishing who do we want to even bring in to our project for that next batch. Right. So because we broke it up, we didn't do like one monolithic sale, we were able to actually start refining, because essentially it's a contract. We trust them and they trust us in the success of the game. So it's fair to not focus our efforts on people that will flip at the minimum variance of the price of the asset you have, but rather people that want to hold for longer because they share that vision. And the data that is in blockchain is just absolutely fabulous for creating high quality community that matches your product, your vision. So I see essentially as an excellent matchmaking, like people that believe strongly on certain project, we should be able to find them more effectively through data that exists on blockchain today.
Thank you. And Saro, I know you, with the support of your team, have been some of the most successful in the industry at bringing traditional users into Web3 gaming, and I wonder what your experience has been in getting to millions of users and how you balance that friction of user onboarding with the native Web3 experience.
Yeah, it's a fascinating time in blockchain gaming because we have onboarded millions of new people into crypto. People have opened up their first wallets because of our game and other games, and that's really great. And I think that the motivations for why people have come in are also quite diverse, and that's quite fascinating, actually, to begin to get behind, what has brought different types of gamers in. So clearly, there's some people who were looking for rewards through like play-to-earn dynamics, and that was a useful funnel for sure. Some of those were more solitary kind of gamers who just wanted to be doing more idle games. But many of them also really enjoyed going more deeper into strategy. So we have progression mechanics and so on that they've gotten extremely into, and they are experts in our NFTs and the different planets and strategy and so on. And they develop groups to sort of optimize their strategy. There's many people who come to Alien Worlds to be social. So because of our DAOs and these teams that are competing against each other, they're getting together in groups, they're developing their own websites, their own Telegram and Discord channels, their own strategies. And it's that behavioral pattern that I think everybody's been talking about, which is this high degree of entrepreneurial and creative activity, right? That happens when you're part of something that's new and growing that you are a co-owner of, which is the unique feature of Web3 versus Web2, right? Is co-ownership. So that's, a really evangelized type of user, a much sort of deeper and stickier person who's coming in and forming a community or a collective. And that's also a different type of funnel. We've also found that being constructed on 3 chains has been useful. So we're the largest gaming application that has implementations across 3 blockchains. And as we know, blockchain technology is both a sort of platform that you're running on, but to an extent, it's also the community base that you're drawing on and contributing to, right? So each chain has its own culture, its own, user base, and so on. So even just that has been useful in terms of reaching a broader audience. It's quite an expensive way of reaching a broader audience because you've got to build on multiple chains and then have interoperability between them and so on. But in our case, it's worked. So yeah, I think that we're still very much in the process of kind of deepening the gameplay and the product offerings for those different types of users, understanding who they are. We know that everybody who's come into the space so far has been an early adopter, almost definitionally, right? So there are people that were open to something new, open to doing something new. Oftentimes actually sort of makers themselves, people who are willing to develop little mini games, little mini competitions, be part of new things, very open-minded, I would say, as a sort of feature of our users. But yeah, I mean, data is one of the things that we'd love to get better at. We generate a lot of data through all of the transactional activity, but it's not associated with an individual. It's associated with a blockchain account. So that's a journey that we're going on too, is of sort of understanding what data we want to take from people and how to use that. But so far, yeah, community is extremely evangelized and is building more creative stuff than we ever could. And half the time we look at what they're doing and then we figure out if there's a way to sort of encode it to make it easier. And of course, that was the record with what happened with like YGG on Axie. And there have been several examples of there's districts within Decentraland that have become extremely mature. So most of the large successful blockchain gaming environments have had success stories within them that have been really significant in their own right and that are really interesting test cases then that the project can look to amplify. So that's been true for us too.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the technology friction has been a challenge for onboarding new users and something that you've all been working to improve. I think the other aspect has been the business model, where over the last 2 years, it's been a lot of crypto for crypto people with very high cost of entry. And I think earlier this year, there began to be a lot more excitement around free to own, play to own, free mints, free drops of assets, with the expectation that those gaming companies or otherwise could continue to benefit from the royalties of trading activity, and saw countless pitches of free NFTs tied to a gaming mechanic that encouraged trading both on primary and secondary marketplaces. Of course, in the last month or so, you, I'm sure, are aware that there's been a rise of marketplaces that make royalties optional or take them away altogether. And I know that has to shape each of your thinking in terms of how you offer assets, what type of trading you encourage, and where you want to push folks to do that trading. Jeremy, I know this is top of mind for you. I wonder how you're thinking about that challenge of royalties, and then would love others to comment as well.
Yeah, very top of mind. And to be honest, I feel a little disillusioned in the space right now. I think part of the ethos of Web3 was always to reward creators, right? Artists who often were pushed out of the profits that a product would generate after inception. But as Andrew mentioned, yesterday, Blur overtook OpenSea, and Blur allows the full bypassing of royalties payment. In this bear market, the sad reality is that totally free is better than partially free, and you give 10% of the profits to the creator. I'll be honest, we just changed our plans in the last 2 weeks, because as of today, there's just no viable business model in launching a new NFT collection. If you can't barely make money on a primary sale, and basically 0%, because 60 or 70% of transaction will occur on Blur or other 0% royalty fee marketplaces. There's just not a business model. So the question is, what do we do to still make this environment thrive? Because without a business model, there's going to be no creators. Why would you work so hard on developing titles or collections or games if you can't just even live on it or pay people's salary? And so the way we're approaching it, and it's very recent, is how do we partner with other folks, like developers, marketplaces, to hopefully create a new ERC standards and get marketplaces to adapt that standard and also enforce that standard, which is always the big piece. You can create all of the ERC protocol you want. If nobody's going to enforce them, they're non-functioning. And so we're really trying to rework the model to ensure that creators get what I think they're owed in order to make sure that Web3 keeps on growing. But super top of mind, and it keeps me up at night right now.
No, totally. And if I may add, when we got into this war, my CTO mentioned that the royalties weren't enforced, but we also say, well, what marketplace would really risk the reputation by not paying the royalties to the owners? And I was like, yeah, that's right, that makes sense. But now we know.
The answer is everyone.
Exactly.
All of them. It's a race to the bottom, sadly.
Exactly. So what we believe is that the future of Web3 gaming is going to be built on trust and alignment. And I think it's a breach of trust, honestly, when there was a deal. This new social contract is essentially a deal.
Yes.
We produce, content, entertainment. Well, you expect that the people that are enjoying that are going to contribute, in this case, what's associated to royalties. So I think that should be solved at a protocol level, and I think there will be some announcements, hopefully later this week or something, that some more of that will be done in that regard, at least when it comes to Solana, which is where we are. But also alignment. So we just last week, we launched a new program called Creator Royalties, where we say if you own one of our Genesis Dragons, actually you get a percentage of the royalties of the descendants. So that creates that alignment. Because in the end, we want them to feel that they're going to be successful if the game is successful. If the game is successful, we are successful, they are successful, everybody's successful. So then I think that being innovative or creating new business models that can align the different participants of the community towards the success of the game is a way of dealing much more, I would say, positive and proactive way than just trying to limit the utility of the items that were purchased, in these marketplaces later. So we're exploring. I think we're all trying to figure out and trying to deal with the changes. But yeah, I think this is a challenge.
Thank you. Well, I know we are tight on time, so maybe abrupt, but I think that's all the time we have today. I really appreciate you staying with us, and thank you very much to our panelists for a great discussion.
Thanks, Andrew.